Hey Strings here. Welcome to another edition of Guitar Lesson. Thanks for your support. Thanks for those that have been sharing, for the likes, for the feedbacks. If you're new, I want you to click the subscribe button. So today we're going to be talking about chords. As you can see at the beginning of the class, I was playing a couple of chords. Chords are what you use to accompany your songs, and what are chords? We'll be talking about this today. How do we form our chords? Last lesson we learned about the scales, the keys and notes. Right now, I believe you should be able to play any key on the guitar. You can spot it. For instance, I can say, give me a C. You know where your C is on any of the string, okay? This is the first step. So what are chords? Chord is simply the combination of three or more notes together to give a single harmony. For instance, I can play a G note. This is a G note. I can play a G chord. This is a single note. Now, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 notes coming together to give me just one harmony. G, G1, and harmonized G. This is a G chord. I can also play a C note. A C chord, C, a C chord. So let's see how we can play our chords. And one more tip, you must also know that chords, it is not every instrument you can play chords on. For you to be able to play a chord on your instrument, it depends on whether your instrument is a monophonic or a polyphonic. I'm going to explain this. A monophonic instrument, mono from the word mono. Mono means just singular, one. You can pronounce phonic, has to do with sound. So monophonic instruments are instruments that can only produce one sound at a time, one note at a time. For example, you have your clarinet, your saxophone, your trumpet, talk about your wind instruments. You can only produce one sound, one note at a time, whereas your polyphonic instruments like your guitar, your piano, your clavichord, your harp, your harpsichord, and so on and so forth. You can play chords on those instruments. Why? Because you can produce more than one note at a time. So for a guitar, I have 6 strings. I can decide to play single notes. I can decide to harmonize. I can play 2 notes at the same time. So I'm patting myself. It's just like I'm using 2 voices. I can use 3 voices. So for a chord, for you to have a chord, you have 3 or more notes, and your instruments must be polyphonic. So let's go on. Triads. What are triads? Triads is simply the 3 notes coming together. When you have 3 notes, remember chord is 3 or more notes. So when you have 3 notes, that's the simplest chord you can have, is what? 3. At least 3 voices. Just like someone singing, you can have your treble, your tenor, your alto, and you can just have one of these. And for a mass choir, you can have several trebles. You can have 6 trebles, for instance. You can have 5 altos, 5 tenors. So it becomes bigger. So the more the notes you have in your chord, the fuller it becomes. But at least you can have 3 of these parts, at least 3. So when you have 3, you call them triads. And so we have 4 types of triads. I'm going to show it for you on the screen. The first type of triad is your major triad. And we must know that triads are formed from the 1st degree, the 1st, the 3rd degree, and the 5th degree in any key. So for you to have a triad, you have your 1, your 3, and your 5 degree. For instance, in the key of C, the major scale, C major scale is what? C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Back to C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 1, which is still C. So I can build my chords. I can build my chords from the 1st degree, the 3rd degree, the 5th degree. So now there are several options So that gives us several triads. So we can have 4 triads, right? The first triad is what? Your major triad, which is 1, 3, and 5. In the key of C, it's going to be C, E, and G. My minor triad is what? 1, then flat 3, and your 5. So it is minor. It is similar to major. Major is 1, 3, and 5. But in the case of your minor triad, you have the root, which is 1, then flat 3. One of the parts went flat. So your minor chord, these chords, all of the triads, they have their sound, their characteristic sound. Major chords, major triads sound bright, lively, while your minor triads can sound kind of dull because of the flat 3. With time, you would be able to differentiate these chords. Then going forward, you have your diminished triad, which is 1, flat 3, and flat 5. So now this time around, you have the roots, which in the key of C, if I were to play a C diminished triad, that would be C, E flat, and G flat. So that will be 1, flat 3. The 2 parts that are harmonizing have gone flat. So you have a diminished triad, 1, flat 3, and flat 5. And for your, the last but not the least is your augmented triad, which is 1, flat 3, and 1, 3, and sharp 5. You have your 1, your 3, and sharp 5. Okay, let's go ahead. Okay, so I'm going to be giving you 3 steps to build your triads in any key, for any scale degree. Now, the first step is write out your chromatic scale. Chromatic scale is the mother scale, the parent scale. It contains all the 12 keys. Remember, there are 12 keys in music. So you write it out. For instance, if I want to get my C triads, I'm going to write out C chromatic scale. That will be C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, like that. I'll go half step, write them out, the 12 keys. Then the next step, step 2, is what? You write out, you apply the major scale formula. Do you remember the major scale formula? I treated the major scale in the previous lesson. I'm going to drop the link in the description under this video. And the major scale formula is tone, tone. The roots, you start with the roots. Then if I want to get a C major scale, I start with the roots, C. Then I go tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. It's a 7-note scale. And once you have your major scale, then the next step, the last step, step 3, is what? You apply your triad formula. You apply the formula for your triad to get your triad. So I can decide to get my C major triad. So I just apply formula 1, 3, 5. I can decide to get C minor triad. I apply 1, flat 3, flat 5, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to be giving us a quick tip or a chart to see what I've been saying since morning. So from this chart, you're going to see, I'm starting with the key of C. From the top, you have your roots, your tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. I wrote out in the first row, I wrote out, I have my chromatic scale, C, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, my chromatic scale. Next, I applied the tone, tone, semitone. Then in your second row, I have my C, D, my major scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Then going down, I have my, I can decide to call them by their numbers, the scale degrees or numbers. 1, C is 1, D, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then you have 8 or 1, which is telling you that is an octave. It's still 8, or you call it 1. And then you have your solfa, the sound. It is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. You understand? So now that we have this, we can build our triads. Just go, for instance, if I want to build C major triad, I start from the first one, which is 1, C, 1, 3, 5, E, and G. So it becomes very easy with this chart. So you want to do this for all the notes in the key of C, all the degrees. So I did for C. The second degree in the key of C is what? D. The third degree is E. So I'm going to go to the key of D. I write out D chromatic scale. I write it out. D, D sharp, E. I now apply my major scale formula. I have D, E, F sharp, G, like that. my D major scale, then I apply my major scale formula 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I have my, once I have my D major scale, I can also now apply my D triads formula. I can have my D major triad, D minor triad, D diminished triad, and D augmented. So I'm going to do this for all the keys in the key of C major scale, all the degrees, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, to the 7th degree. And I want to give you a quick tip. How do you know the right triad to use? Since we have 4 of them, how do we know the right triad to use? How do I know when I'm supposed to play either a C major triad or a C minor triad or a C diminished triad or a C augmented triad? So there are rules, there are pros and cons. Remember I said chord is notes that come together to harmonize. So now it depends with the key, the roots. Now we're starting with C. C is our root here. C is our 1, the 1st degree. So I write out all of the C major scale and write out all my triads. C major triad 1, 3, 5, 1 flat 3, 5. Now the rule is the notes in the C major scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. I choose the triad. I have to, out of these 4 triads, I choose the triad that have the same notes as my major scale. For instance, here I'm going to choose C major for my 1 chord. I'm going to choose C major. Why? C major is C, E, and G. You can find these notes C, E, and G in the key, in the scale, the major scale of C. But I cannot find. I'm not choosing a C minor. Why? Because C minor is C, E flat. There is no E flat in the C major scale. Likewise, I'm not also choosing the C diminished. C diminished is C, E flat, and G flat. E flat and G flat, they do not appear in the C major scale. And I also did not choose my C augmented, which is C, E, and G sharp. G sharp is not in major scale. So the only one that appears, one of them, it is only one of them that is going to match the scale of the key you're choosing, which is what C, E, and G. So I chose C major out of all of my triads. Now moving forward, D, for my D chord, which is my 2nd degree, I'm going to choose what? A D minor triad. If you choose D major triad is what? D, F sharp, and A, 1, 3, and 5. But you notice F sharp is not in the key of what? C. So I do not choose it. It's not going to harmonize. So you must choose the notes that appear in the scale. If I choose D, F, and A, D, F is in what? The scale of what? C. D is there, A is there. So I choose D minor triad over all the other triads. And as you would see in the charts, I highlighted the triads I chose with white. The ones in yellow, I do not choose them. I have chosen the ones in white because they appear in the what? C major scale. So I can now have my chords for all the degrees in the key of C. My 1st degree, I'm choosing what? A C major triad. My 2nd, D, I'm choosing a D minor triad. We'll see how we can play this chord. And for my E, I chose E minor triad. For my F, which is my 4th degree, I'm choosing a what? F major triad, which is F, A, C. For my 5 chord, 5 degree, which is G, I'm choosing a what? A G major triad, G, B, D. For my 6, I'm choosing what? A minor triad, A, C, and E. Then last but not the least, for my 7, I'm choosing B diminished. If you choose D major, B major is what? B, D sharp, and F sharp. F sharp and D sharp do not occur in the C major scale. So I highlighted that one in yellow, which means I'm not choosing that one. Then going downward, B minor, let's try B minor. B minor is what? B, D sharp, and B, D, and F sharp. F sharp is still not going, so it's not going to harmonize. I'm going to choose what? B, D, and what? F, which is what? My B diminished, which is 1 flat 3 and 5 flat 5. If you flatten the 3rd from F sharp, if you flatten it, you have F. Likewise, if you flatten the fifth from G sharp, you have what? G. Hence, you have what? B diminished for the seventh degree. So this is the structure for all the what? Degrees in the key of C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. That's the major scale. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So for all of these degrees, for any key, this is what you're going to do. For any key, for what you're going to realize, you realize that your one is what? Always a major chord. Your one chord is what? Always a major. Your fourth chord is always major. Your 1, 4, and 5 are major chords. Your 2, 3, and 6 are what? Minor chord. Then your seventh is what? A diminished chord. So I have it on the chart there. 1 is what? Major. 2, minor. 3, minor. 4, major. 5, major. 6, major, minor, and 7 diminished. Back to what? 1 is what? Major. Then let's apply this. In the key of C, the structure for the key of C is what? My 1 is what? C, which is major. So I have C major, which is C, E, and G. My 2 is what? D minor. It's a minor chord, so I chose D, F sharp, D, F, and A. My 3 is what? E, which is E minor, E, G, B. 4 is what? F, which is F, A, C, F major. Your 5 is major, G, G, A, G, B, D. Your 6 is what? Minor, A, C, E. Your 7th is what? Diminished, B, D, and F. So with this, I can, if you want to know that you've, I know this may hurt your brain right now, and your brain is going through a lot. Just go through this. This is the foundation. Once you know the choice of chords, once you know how the chords are built, because it is the chords that we use to what? Play, to accompany songs. And if you don't know your chords, you are, so this is the very foundation, the basic. So once you know this, every other thing becomes easy. When we get to 7th chord, it's just from these triads. We just add the 7th. Don't worry, we'll go to that in details in some subsequent classes. And next class, we'll see how we can play all of these triads. We hear their sounds, and we see how we can play them on the guitar. And afterwards, we'll see how we can play them, put them into practice, into songs. As I said earlier, guitar is a polyphonic instrument. It's a polyphonic instrument, and this gives us advantage. For your guitar, you can play chords, you can accompany yourself. Whereas for your sax, you can just play one note. You cannot play chords. You cannot accompany yourself. For instance, I can play both the melody, and since it's a polyphonic instrument, I can have something like this. So I was able to play that because I can play chords. So instruments that can play chords tend to be harder because you're not just playing single notes. You learn the scales, you learn the melody, then you also have to learn the chord structures. So guitar, with your guitar, it's a complete instrument. You can play the rhythm, the bars, the melody. At the same time, you can control it yourself. Whereas for monophonic instruments, you have to wait for like others. You have to, for your sax, you have to be like 2 or 3 to harmonize yourself. But here, you determine what you do yourself. And for your assignment, you want to do the same thing. I did it in the key of C. I wrote out all my scale degrees in the key of C. You want to do the same thing for D sharp, for C sharp, D sharp, E. So you write out, for instance, in the key of D, write out D major scale. D, you have D, E, F sharp, G, A, you have B, C sharp, and D. So these are the 7 degrees. So I start with my 1, which is what? D. So I write it out, my D chromatic scale. Next, I apply my D major scale to have my D major scale. You have your 7 degrees now. So you start with the first degree, which is D. So my 1 degree will be what? D major, because it will be D, F sharp, and A. F sharp appears in the what? D major scale, right? So I'm not choosing D minor this time around because my 1 chord is what? Always major, as you can see. So my 2 chord is going to be what? E. That will be what? I'll have E minor if you write it out. The same thing, you get your 3 to be what? F sharp. In the key of D, F sharp is going to be your 3rd degree, which will be what? F sharp major. So just do this. I know it takes time, but once you do this, you begin to discover a whole lot of stuff. This is just the theory part. In next class, we'll do the practical. So see you in the next class. Keep enjoying music. I remain Faith Strings. Thanks. Bye-bye.